There's a lot more conversation about seed saving. There's more kids that are doing community gardens at their school. So there's little steps of skill sets. I wish every child had to go through home economics and personal finance 4 years in high school to be able to graduate here. Like it has been a detriment for them to take out home economics, managing household systems, growing your food. They're basic skills that everybody deserves the right to learn, whether you live in a house or an apartment. I think everybody's got the right to at least have access to this way of thinking around food and nutrition. And
Yeah.
then what they do with it is up to them.
So, welcome again, Dr. Paula, after our first episode on archaeoastronomy. And this time we are actually doing the video podcast. But before we begin, would you like to introduce yourself a bit for the audience who are watching you first time on the video?
Oh, sure. Thank you. Yeah, I enjoy being here. I work from home. I have a PhD, and I'm also a single parent of two daughters, and I also have two dogs. So it's always about a balance. I was born and raised in Oregon in the Portland area here in the United States. And I was very privileged to be able to go to graduate school and spend 7 years learning with Indigenous and Native elders in a decolonization program, which is really the pivot point of my life, because life has not been the same for the last 30 years. But now I'm hitting another pivot point, having gone through a life of lecturing and writing articles and working with students and serving on committees and getting also involved in my kids' schools and coaching sports. It's like I'm now coming to a place where I can sit back a little bit more and reflect deeper on the things that I think about, have conversations like this that are meaningful. So a lot of my background is in philosophy and consciousness and decolonization, and how this lens and this worldview can approach the variety of topics that you and I talk about, that I really enjoy talking about. And how can things like indigenous science find meaning in our daily lives? And that's really what it is about for me, is how can I take something that is scientific and philosophical and psychological and spiritual, and bridge it into something that's practical and understandable and digestible, to those of us, getting through the day with the many tasks or jobs or kids or things that we do. So I feel like, my life has been a bit of an adventure into a lot of different dimensions of Western and Native thinking. But it really is about how can I now be a template or share the knowledge that was given to me, that I've learned over the years in a variety of topics, and really how it can help me create a lifestyle of healing my own suffering and really providing support for those people who suffer around me. I mean, we all age, we all go through a lot of things in life. And I have found that the connection to my ancestors, the connection to the earth, the connection to my food, the connection to my dreams has really helped me to get through the day. So I appreciate this platform and seeing where we go with all the different things we talk about. And in the end, I hope that it provides support for each person to have that connection within themselves. And then, this is how we build community. So thank you. My grandmother was born in 1908, and when she was 95 years old, she would still every early spring go get her tomato starts and grow her tomatoes. And it was like all that she could do in her mid 90s was to grow tomatoes.
Yeah.
But it was like the process that I took her through. She still had a need to can her jelly, so we would get berries, either, stuff that I'd picked, or they would go out and pick their berries and then, can their jelly. So I saw the tail end of her canning and her doing things by hand, to where now at this age I kind of kick myself that I didn't pay attention to those skills and get those skills. Now I did get her cookie recipes and I got her cookie skills, and I got, some certain things, that recipes that I picked up on, but I didn't get until later in life, after she passed, the importance of picking up those skills.
Yeah.
So I remember growing up with that stuff. My kids have not been raised with their mom canning jelly or making her own marinara and doing the whole canning process. But what they're seeing me do is watch Instagram influencers who are homesteaders make their sourdough start, and they're seeing me make sourdough and learn the process. They're seeing me make stuff in the slow cooker. Back in the day, my mom would put everything in the slow cooker and you'd smell it cooking all day, and then you'd be really hungry for dinner.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of going back to some of the things that I was raised with my mom. I was raised in the 70s, so a lot of it is when that's when convenience, microwave, drive through, that's when all of that stuff kicked in. So I was raised
Yeah.
on that.
The whole culture of supermarkets actually came from America, specifically the north of America. The whole of the world is experiences or sees supermarket as a norm, because if there are no supermarkets, a lot of us would go nuts in the current times, right? So when you
Yeah.
mentioned about your grandma, and then I'm talking about the supermarkets, ha, have you heard stories from her? Because you briefly mentioned about the jellies as well. How was the life back then? Without the supermarkets, and I can imagine like a lot. It has a lot to do with wars and different situations, just to make things easier for people and have them show up at work without lesser of problems they have to deal being in the kitchen, be it the man or the woman. Uh, would you like to share like some stories and the differences that you see in the current times, and probably like what you've heard from your grandmother, because it would be very interesting to hear about it from someone coming from America,
Mhm.
about these differences and experiences.
Well, my grandmother, she passed away when she was 98, and that was in 2000, and I want to say like 2009 or something. I'd have to do the math. But she came from the generation where they would walk to school in their bare feet, and they would walk a mile and a half to go to the local schoolhouse. She grew up outside of Portland in a very small, like, farming community called Kelso, and in Boring, Oregon. And so a lot of, because it wasn't a condensed city, it wasn't like it is now. There was a lot more space. There was more people lived on property with their animals that they milked, that they got their milk from, that they made their butter from. My grandmother they made all those things based on, what they had on their property from the animal products. But then it was, every summer during berry season, they would go out to the fields and they would all pick berries. And then they would, it would be like a rite of passage where they would get the berries and they would do it as a family. They would then process the berries and, as a family, turn it into jam. And everybody had a part in that. And it was like a rite of passage or a ritual every year
Yeah.
when berry season came around. So, I grew up with her doing that. And then as I, came into motherhood and I started doing all these things, well, with kids, you kind of need stuff to do. And I wasn't one to just constantly put my kid in front of an iPad or something. So, going berry picking every July at my daughter's birthday, we would go blueberry picking. We would get Marion berries. We'd go out. There's farms all around Portland, all around the city. You don't have to go very far from the city central here in Portland to get to the farms. We even have urban farms here, that do a lot of education, showing people how to grow. But where I live is also very farm minded. There's a lot of farmers markets. There's a lot of schools where kids learn how to grow a garden from farm to table. Farm to table is a really big thing, from seed to table. So kids learn the process of, of that. It's a real big thing to have urban kids learn how to grow a garden. Like, there's a
Right.
lot of openness and curriculum around that. And I know that there is around the world. So in terms of like, I was raised watching my grandma do some homestead skills. And then my mom, we were the generation of in the 70s and the 80s of the microwave.
Mm.
So, processed cereal, just all the processed food. It had its heyday in the 70s and 80s. And that's kind of what I was raised on, because that was what was available at the supermarket. And
True.
my mom, you know, didn't the time my mom's a baby boomer, and at that time, it was just going to the grocery store and getting the food, and that was it. And it was also, a lot of it was just convenience, because both of my parents worked all day. So it wasn't unheard of to have a TV dinner. Like, that was just part of the norm of growing up in the 70s. Well, then fast forward, I'm 29, 30 years old, and I'm diagnosed with a nutritional disease called multiple sclerosis. And I'm doing everything in my power to get away from the foods that came from the convenience stores, getting back to the whole foods that weren't necessarily the foods that, my grandmother was raised with. I didn't get to that homesteader mindset first. What I got to was the importance of a plant-based foundation. So then, when it came to healing my body of nutritional disease, which is basically just eating a lot of sugar, a lot of processed food, maybe more heavy on the animal product and less on, the fruits and vegetables. So I just had to rearrange, take a lot of things out. And then I got reconstituted to going to the farmer's market to get my food, going to the grocery store and going around the perimeter of it instead of going into where all the stuff is. And then that just led into me, when I became a mom, taking my kids berry picking, and then going, wow, like, maybe we should get jam that is, fresh made from the farm, instead of buying something on the shelf. And so then I just started reverting to, can I get this local? Can I pick it? Can I grow it? I would just ask myself these questions, to the point now where I'm doing that with the forest. Now I'm into foraging for huckleberries, which is like the best berry on the planet. Very
Well,
medicinal, very sacred berry. And so going foraging for mushrooms, for oyster mushrooms and morels and lion's mane, learning how to grow these things and produce these
I have
things.
a question. Like before we go to the point where you would talk about how to grow them,
Hmm.
there's also an art to do the right picking or how to pick them. Because a lot of
Oh,
them
when to
could be
pick things.
poisonous.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think
When to
that's.
pick it. Yeah.
And how did you learn? Like probably through a lot of sources of books, uh, or is it just that easy? Would you like to uh, just tell us a little bit about it before we go further?
You mean foraging kind of picking, like how to pick things out of the forest?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I grew up, we have a cabin up on Mount Hood, and I grew up going to the forest every weekend and going
Wow.
skiing every winter. It was a very privileged upbringing, I do say. And I had a grandfather who, when I went to the forest, he had a real thing for naming the trees. So, Douglas fir and cedar and maple. And so I kind of grew up on, the trees being like beings almost. Like, my grandfather would name the different kinds of trees, and then, we would talk about the trees, and the trees are so huge and they're so knowledgeable. It's like just being there in the forest with my grandfather, talking about the trees, with the trees, amongst the trees. Just for me, gave me a connection to the forest to learn how to listen to
Mm.
the forest. So when I got older and I was really into Whole Foods and farmers markets and whatnot, I thought a little bit about. I'm not a prepper. But I thought, gosh, if something ever happened in the future and I didn't know how to eat out of the forest, I might starve. So I started with, my favorite berry in the on the planet is a huckleberry, and huckleberries only grow a certain time of the year, and there's only certain places that we can pick huckleberries if we're not native, because it's very sacred to the native tribes. It's grown it comes into the forest a certain time of the year. There's stories and traditions and cultures around it. And it's also something bears like to eat. So it's not such something I thought, I'm going to go get huckleberries in the forest and I just, get out there with my basket. I want to be respectful to the native tribes. I want to be respectful to the bears, and I want to be respectful to the berries, all of it. So I have a cousin that just happened to be a caretaker or a host for the Gifford Pinchot Forest over in Washington. So these are the huckleberries,
Oh,
and they're really they're that big. Um, there's nothing else like that flavor. It's so sweet. It's like the sweetest blueberry you could imagine.
yeah. I mean, it just looked like a blueberry to me.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
like a little. They're in the blueberry family, but they taste very different. It's so full of antioxidants. It's like twice as potent as a blueberry. It's just full of oxygen,
mm,
um, and they're so sweet. I can see why the bears, go in the forest and pick them. So when I got a hold of my cousin, her husband is native, and so he knows how to go out into the forest in a respectful way. He knows, he has a knife, and he knows how to deal with the creatures of the forest if a bear was to come our way. So he kind of gave us a little instruction, and we went out into this field, and there was just thousands of berries. And so I just, you just get into, for me, just a zone, almost like a meditation, and I just start gathering the berries. And they're so expensive that when we were driving back to town, I think I might have gotten like a quarter of a gallon of a bag, a gallon bag. I got like a quarter of a bag.
mm.
And when I went back to town, I usually buy a quart of berries, but a gallon bag of huckleberries this year was $80. Last year it was $120. So the amount of berries that I gathered foraging, in the 3 hours that I did it was like such a small amount compared to the gallon bag that I purchased. So what I learned about foraging is that I can't get enough of it, and I want to keep doing it. Like, all I could think about was getting back out to the forest to do it again. Like, there's something about that gathering of that berry, because it tastes good, but it's highly medicinal and highly beneficial, like that elderberry. It's really, really good for the body, and fighting, viruses and things that are coming at us from all these directions. We can truly use the things in the forest, and a lot of these homestead skills and type, whole foods we can use to, deal with what's going to be coming at us. But a lot of what disease and illness comes from is what's in our food. It's like I was just listening to something about how they fortify dairy, and they fortify wheat, and they put folic acid into it. Well, I can't methylate folic acid. In fact, it absolutely comes in as a toxin. So all of these enriched foods, enriched cereal, enriched bread, and enriched milk is actually full of things that are making people sick. So what's making people sick are what we're eating, the things that are being sprayed on it, the things that, the genetic things that are genetically modified. Now Bill Gates wants to put this appeal coat, this layer on it, to coat it because of the bugs. So all of that just makes me go back to, the importance of
Yeah.
me saving seeds and growing my own, you
Yeah, I think
know
there's also a debate about this company. I don't want to. I mean, the podcast is not about that. I think the Monsanto.
yeah.
I
Oh
think
yeah.
it has its presence everywhere in the world, and
Well, it's
like the
all
kind
over
of
Oregon. I
recipe.
mean, It's a big deal in Oregon because Oregon is an agricultural state, and like Oregon State University, a lot of their funding comes through from Monsanto. So a lot of the wheat and the hemp and the things that are grown here, there's a lot of controversy around it being grown, and sprayed and grown from seeds that come from
Mm.
companies that, alter for whatever reasons they do. But then this altering or this spraying is causing cancers and, different diseases and conditions. So it's like
Yeah.
overwhelming. Like, what do we do? And I think i don't I don't think in terms of the work that I do having importance to humanity and the world anymore. I used to think like that, like my ideas matter, my ideas will help humanity, my ideas will help the country that I live in. I've stopped thinking like that. I think that's slightly delusional to think that way. And I think it's just a little bit of like Pollyanna mindset that I truly feel like I want my ideas to change and heal the world. Well, I stopped thinking that way and I started thinking more local. I
True.
started thinking about my water, where it comes from, if it's filtered, how clean can I get it? The food that I eat, the resources that I have, the plastic that I say no to, all the things that I consume is where I kind of put my attention. Not to where I'm obsessed about it, but I
Yeah.
stop and I pause for a minute before I put my money toward it. And I think, what benefit does this have, to my health? And is it going to benefit my health or hinder my health? And so I
Yeah.
really think about that with the bread that I buy. I don't buy bread anymore. I have a sourdough starter and I make all my own bread products. So, and then I source the cleanest possible flour in the price range I can afford. And that doesn't necessarily mean the most expensive or the
Yeah.
most organic or the most anything, but I work with what I've got. And I can't focus on the world and what I'm doing to heal the world. What I can focus on is what I'm doing to heal my body and what I'm doing to support my children having the nutritional education to become adults and navigate the nutrition, um, you know, illness, chronic health condition world that manifests because of what we eat.
Yeah.
I don't want to say to my kids, if you eat this processed food, this is going to cause diabetes or cancer. But the reality is that these foods create these conditions. So I try not to overstimulate and overwhelm my children on food and food choices. I just really try to provide as much whole food as possible.
Yeah.
And they still eat the processed stuff. They still eat the sugar, but they at least stop and think about where it comes from.
Yeah.
And now my daughter came to me, my 17-year-old came to me. She goes, "Mom, do you have bee pollen, don't you?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, it's in the fridge." And she goes, "Well, I read something about it being relating to what you talked about when you talked about it." So finally it's starting to sink in. Bee pollen can help her stimulate her immune system locally so that she's less reactive to the pollen that's flying around in the air when we're going in between seasons. So she started thinking on her own, if I take bee pollen, I can get some of these, I can get some vitamin and some nutrient, but I can also better regulate my allergies and
Mm.
the seasonal changes. And it's like she was raised with me telling her that, but finally on her own she realized that, read it somewhere, and then started on the bee pollen on her own.
Oh,
And
that's
that's
interesting.
really the best I can do, is to just affect, with information, maybe the people around me that I care about. But that's really where I put my attention. Because if those people put their attention around the people they cared about, it would spread out and it would reach humanity. But instead of thinking about how what I'm doing is affecting the whole, I can only think local right now. I can only think local. What kind of soil is in my backyard? Is it organic and nutrient and living enough for me to grow vegetables and plant medicine that I can then bring onto my table from the seed, create a nutritious meal, make my plant remedies, heal myself, and then share that with the people around me that I then barter and trade with for other things that I can turn into remedies or concoctions or, food items. Like it just it feels like a simpler way to exist and live without all the complications of the store and the choices and the ingredients and all of the distractions for us to like just choose the drive through instead of just stopping and thinking about like, where is it coming from, where is the soil that's coming from that grew this food that I'm eating. And just for me, naturally coming back to the source of getting as local as possible, um, just came from me not feeling good eating certain food and realizing that it's the food that's making me sick.
Yeah.
So the closer I can get to the source, the better I'll feel. And now I can enjoy treats from time to time. I can enjoy holidays and birthdays and enjoy, some fun things that I normally don't eat all the time because the rest of the time my guts are stable. But if I eat something slightly off or slightly processed, immediately I'll know it.
Yeah.
Immediately I'll know it. So I think it's about being in alignment with the soil, with the cycles of, animals, with the cycles of the plants, with the cycles of the seasons,
Yeah.
not eating berries in the middle of December when we know that July and August is kind of when they're at their peak.
Yeah.
Like seasonal eating is a whole other level. Like
Yeah.
that's a whole other
I
topic
think
for
this
some.
whole area is quite gray. Like if we look at it from a very high level, or like a complete picture, if you try to find answers there, I think a lot would make sense because definitely whatever you mentioned, I think the seasonal order of the fruits and veggies, and the same order we should consume it, and also considering the soil, its nutrients. uh, it's still like very gray, in the current times to really understand
Well,
it. But like starting
yeah,
local and
yeah,
focusing on the
yeah.
seasonal eating, I think is very simple to start with, uh, for
I
sure. And
think it is
because
too, because the environment, like, you know, there's certain times of the year that apples, like we live in the Willamette Valley and we live in very volcanic soil, so it's very nutrient rich and everything grows here. We're known for our craft everything, beer, cider, wine, farmers markets, like everything. You can do almost anything in this climate. It's wonderful. So what I've been doing over the years is just going with the cycles of the season. Now the challenge of that is that I don't do enough canning to then go through that time of the year where I get into the root cellar and I'm eating out of the root cellar because of all of the preparation that I've done to get to the winter. Like that's a whole other level.
yeah.
What I do is I do my best to meet myself where I'm at. I don't have any fantasies of living on a homestead out in out in the countryside. I live where I live. I live in the city. So I do these little things to adapt. So I eat berries at certain times of the year. I'll eat hazelnuts at certain times of the year. Yes, I can access them all year round, but I try to give my body that natural rhythm of what's indigenous and local in on this landscape. There's certain things that have been brought to this landscape that has been developed over you know many years. That's just kind of where I'm trying to focus on how I eat. And then you eat things out of storage. Like a lot of people that do eat animal products here, go in with different families and they'll buy an entire cow and then they'll pack that in the freezer. And so then, a lot of people just can eat off of that for the year. There's a lot of support for eating locally, eating seasonally, and eating mindfully. And I'm really thankful that in Portland, it's a place where there's communities of people that support eating this way and thinking this way, but also bartering this way. A lot of people
Yeah.
have goats in the city. There's people that make goat cheese that trade their goat cheese for my topical, and I'll trade my topical to my friend that has the elderberries growing in her yard. So it feels more natural, and it does feel more indigenous minded to trade and barter for food, to eat seasonally, and to share our resources. Now, I'm
Yeah.
not going to do that with all of Portland because there's a
Hmm.
lot of people that just aren't into this. But I think when you align within yourself the connection to the soil and the earth and the land and the seeds and the plants and the animals, you automatically align yourself with people that also think this way too.
I agree. I
So
agree.
I know a lot of different people that have eggs that trade for elderberry, that trade for my remedies. And so we just have this network because this is where my mindset is. And these are the people that I draw in when I'm in conversation, making connections at the farmer's market
Yeah.
or even online. I've met quite a few people online as well, locally,
That's
who we
beautiful.
trade, my topical for her mushrooms. So you just, I think, gravitate toward people that, whether they're in your neighborhood or they're across town, it's like you gravitate toward people that have this consciousness that function this way. And this I would say it's underground, but this way of barter and trade hasn't it's always gone on. It hasn't gone anywhere since my grandmother's time. It's just not as prevalent in this day and age on the mainstream level. But I think that people are naturally reverting back to the skill sets. I think that's where it's turning. You're seeing people wanting to learn how to make sourdough. There's a lot more conversation about seed saving. There's more kids that are doing community gardens at their school. So there's little steps of skill sets. I wish every child had to go through home economics and personal finance 4 years in high school to be able to graduate here. Like it has been a detriment for them to take out home economics, managing household systems, growing your food. They're basic skills that everybody deserves the right to learn, whether you live in a house or an apartment. I think everybody's got the right to at least have access to this way of thinking around food and nutrition. And
Yeah.
then what they do with it is up to them. But I fully support, communities and bartering and trading amongst people. Like the people I trade with come from different cultures. So there's a lot of different cultural items and cultural flavors that get shared as well. And I feel like for me, it's what kind of gets me excited about my day,
Yeah.
you know, returning to
Uh,
the old ways.
that's very positive. I think it's such a motivational thing that you mentioned. But out of all the negative news you hear from the United States, I think this is one of the very positive thing that you're mentioning. At the local level, it already gives so much of hope. It's the people
Oh,
are
yeah.
bringing things together. Things do make sense. And I think it would surely set very good examples for others to follow. Like
Well,
that's the
yeah.
most important thing. Starting small and setting examples, which
Yeah.
definitely are very meaningful in the current times. And
Well, and there's people that out there that do so much more than me. Like I'm just affecting the people that I care about the most. Like that's really who my audience is for what I do, are the people that are around me all of the time. There's so many cool permaculture communities.
yeah,
There's so many things going on, but it's all done, some of it has a Facebook page or an Instagram page, but there's so much of this lifestyle and thinking. Like in New York, they have eco gardens on the
yeah,
roofs of some of these buildings where there's community gardens. Like there's so many cool things going on. But unfortunately, as you know, the media portrays, even where I live, Portland, it's like it's portrayed in a way that is just full of news speak and propaganda. And so
and
I
guns.
all of it, it's just it's not accurate. And
Yeah.
that's what bothers me the most, is that what's not getting out there are the stories of the people who live in the communities that are doing these things.
Mm.
So for me, I'm one person, but I'm one person who has rallied and gotten our neighborhood association back and running. So there's 2,500 people in my neighborhood who I'm trying to rally up and get together so we can have community safety meetings. We can, have community garden shares. There's a lot of possibility if we can just get together as our neighborhood association. And I'm just one person who I want to live in my community. I don't necessarily need to know all my neighbors and have
Of
barbecues and be
course.
best friends with everybody around me, but I want to have quality of life, and I want to have livability, and I want to enjoy where I live, even if it is low income, even if it is very culturally diverse and low income. We have an ability to enjoy our community, and it doesn't have to go beyond the community that I live in. And that's really where I'm focusing my attention, is how can the kids in the community learn about gardening. I invite kids in the community to come over and have dinner. I openly talk about cannabis with anybody. I don't care if it's a teenager, if it's an elder. I will talk about it with anybody so that you know the community has an opportunity to experience making pesto from your backyard, making sourdough bread from the starter that I've been working on for 3 months, or, you know, eating applesauce from, the apple tree growing in my backyard. It's like the kids are like, wow, really? Like this, you picked this and now I'm eating it? Like it's so mind blowing. It's so mind blowing to the kids that, like, this was done in this way. But then the excitement that I see when they do it themselves
Yeah.
is, like I taught a kid how to use the juicer the other day, and it was like, it was like, turning on a video game for the first time. It was just
Yeah.
something that was tangible and real, and they knew the whole time they were doing it, it was healthy for them, because I was looking up in a book, what ginger is and what spinach is and what all the things that they were putting in there, what benefit it had to the body. So then when they were drinking it, it's like they were making the connection between, the garden and the plant, and the process of it and the nutrition into the body. It's like, and I've just learned, honestly, that it's just about literally, this is so ironic, but it's just about planting seeds in people, planting seeds of ideas or seeds of thought, that if I can just show somebody how I'm doing it, this is my template, these are my ideas, this is, what works for me, and I plant that seed. Like with my daughter, she came back to me with that seed of information, and she said, I heard this and I remember you saying that, but now it kicked in. And so really that's the best that we can do to pay forward what we know of the lifestyle we have. That's, the lifestyle I have because I have, multiple sclerosis. I have a brain injury and an autistic brain. And so the lifestyle that I have comes from my own suffering. So the nutrition that I put into my body is my medicine. My food is my medicine, and it goes into my body. And so, I should be in a wheelchair. I should be walking with a cane. There's a lot of things that I should be doing, but my body is where it's at because I'm using um, I'm using my environment to help me heal. I'm using my local food to help me heal. I'm using the activity of going outside every day and putting my hands in the soil to help me heal. And so
Mm.
all of these things, plus I can make a really great topical for days that my hands are stiff or my body doesn't feel good. And so all of these things that I'm doing, I do because it's what's helping me heal, and it's helping me to suffer less, to eat this
And
way, to grow medicine this way. And so if my ease of my suffering can help somebody else, that's why I share it, because
and
it's
that's
what's getting.
really really noble. I think that's it's very positive, very motivational at the same time. So yeah, yeah, kudos to you. I think that's
Yeah.
that's that's really brilliant. Whatever you're doing, and I think all around the world there's sort of an awakening as well around this, and which is also very good to hear and see. And that people are quite active at the smaller community levels and local farmers. I also see it here in Netherlands, and also I was talking to a friend of mine in Sweden. I think they also have a concept of local farm,
Mm-hmm.
and they do it a little bit in a way that, uh, I mean, everyone has a different pattern, or a different format to do it. She was mentioning that they have a concept where you can just pay a monthly subscription,
Yes.
uh, and then they would deliver whatever is local, like the local
Yeah.
farmers would deliver. So if you cannot really barter, then you can have subscriptions, and then they would surprise you with the package. They can deliver, and it's all seasonal
Well, they
vegetables.
do that here in Oregon, and they do it in quite a few places. But here in Oregon, it's called a CSA share, and in that share, you're just getting like a weekly share from that crop that's been,
Wow.
that's rotating through that farm. And what I really love about these programs is that they're now actually working with people that use food stamps. So you can use your food stamps to access the share. And a lot of the farmers markets, if you go to the farmers market, you can, use your food stamp card and they'll give you bucks. They'll give you farmers market bucks. So you can get like, for every dollar you spend, you get $2 of the farmers market bucks that can then go into the economy of the farmers market. So it pays, the vendor, but then it also stimulates the economy and it gets the people on food stamps, putting the food stamps toward fresh fruits and vegetables and things that support the local farmer. So I think it's a really great model to get low income people who, have other challenges to be able to have access to farmers markets. And and then it keeps it's like I feel like it's a healthy community mindset. And it goes on, and it's been happening. I don't think it's ever stopped, but it's not something that's mainstream and really known about or talked about, but it's there. Like,
Yeah.
our community lost our farmers markets, which is unfortunate, but then the farmers markets in the outlying communities around us grew. So then, we just started supporting those farmers markets. And then I started getting involved in a food co-op. And there's a couple of storefronts that are co-ops where you buy, I spend $150 and I bought a share into that co-op so that, when I go to buy my goods, I get those goods at a discount because I'm buying it, as a share with other people. So there's a lot of that way of bartering and trading and being in community that hasn't stopped.
Yeah.
It's just the distraction of convenience, processed fast food has because there's a market there. There's a market for money, and there's a
Yeah.
market for ill health that creates a market for money for, doctors and pharmaceutical industries. So I'm just trying to take out all the players and go direct as much
Yeah.
as possible.
I think the whole mindset is around the cure, not the prevention. And also the lifestyle that we are in, when you mentioned about money, uh, I think all of us in the current times are like in a system which keeps us very busy. So for a lot of people, it's not even
Mhm.
makes sense to think in that direction. You
Right.
just go to the
Right.
supermarket, you only have like 10 minutes in the day, grab whatever you can, and then just go home. You don't even have like time to even think about the community, or like bartering, or maybe you are living somewhere where it's not even possible. So there
I mean,
are like dark sides of it,
yeah,
but
there are. I mean, I'm a single parent and I have two children and I have disability challenges and
yeah.
I can do it. It just takes self-discipline. It takes saying no to the processed food, saying no to the sugar, saying no to the convenience, saying no to the chemicals, saying no to the packaging, saying no to all of that, and saying yes to I want to feel better and I want to teach my children how to feel better. And it doesn't have to be, you know, with food that is really expensive.
Right.
It just goes back to whole foods and accessing whole foods and learning how to do it. I people can do it. They just have to relearn how to eat whole foods for, a mindset that actually prevents ill health. But we're not taught that in the paradigm we live in.
Yeah.
We're
I
just
have
taught
one.
to consume and capitalism and consumerism are the driving ideology of the framework we live in. We don't live in a holistic uh, worldview. There's
Yeah,
some of us
not
that do,
sustainable
but
for sure.
right,
Not
it's
self
not.
sustainable. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I have one question for you. You were mentioning about the seeds. So if someone has to do it, uh, of course, like it's very difficult to get access to seeds, and I don't know if it's even in the regulations. How does it work if you want to get seeds for a certain fruit or vegetables? And also the process, maybe you can share it from your own experience having your kitchen garden, because apparently you never used I mean, you were not using fertilizers or anything, because that's the whole purpose. So maybe can you tell us a little bit about your journey doing this, and more of an experience, I would say.
Well, a lot of when it comes to seeds, I mean, you can walk into any hardware store, any grocery store, almost any store and find seeds here in the United States. Well, at least in the Northwest. I can go to the hardware store, there's seeds. There's rows and rows and rows of seeds. Now, there's certain kinds of seeds. There's certain brands like, Monsanto driven seeds. There's seeds that come from Miracle Grow and Bonnie Bell, and there's all these brands of seeds,
Yeah.
which are the ones I tend to,
Avoid.
I'll buy what I can, but I tend to gravitate toward the heirloom seeds.
Which
Um,
I guess they are
they're
organic, right?
heirloom. Well, they're heirloom. And heirloom, like there's heirloom, there's Roma tomatoes and there's cherry tomatoes, and then there's heirloom tomatoes. And the heirloom tomatoes are the ones that grow in like different shapes and sizes and
Right.
colors, and they're not perfect in every form. They're not genetically modified to look like a perfect tomato every time it comes out from the vine.
Right.
They're grown with the least amount of altercation, or the seed has the least amount of altercation. So any kind of heirloom seeds, um, those are the seeds that I go for, and I pretty much do not consume food that doesn't have, if it's supposed to have a seed, I will not eat it if it doesn't have a seed in it. So I do not eat seedless watermelon. I do not eat seedless grapes. Anything that's seedless, and they're hard to find now. Finding things
Yeah.
with seeds in them is very hard to find because it's just another way to control the seeds. Because if you take
Right.
that watermelon and, back when I was a kid, the seeds, we used to spit them out. Excuse me. We
That's
used
true.
to spit them out. Now, had I thought about it, I would have been saving those seeds and, and drying them and planting them during the next growing cycle. But that's not what I do. So when I eat a cantaloupe or I eat a watermelon or if I eat anything with a seed, I'll attempt to grow it like an avocado seed. I'll attempt to dry it and preserve it for the next grow season so that the stuff that I'm putting into the ground, it's something that I have experience growing. I'm not just grabbing any seed from the seed packet in the hardware store and doing what I want with it. And that's better than nothing. At least we have access to seeds. At least we have access to growing those seeds. But if
Hmm.
you can then get particular on what kinds of seeds you grow, where you get your seeds from, preserving those seeds, there's a lot of seed trade and a lot of seed share all over the planet. I mean, seeds are there's seed vaults, the elite seed
True.
vaults that you hear about. So
Yeah.
it really
But
starts with the
having
soil.
access to all of that is more of a question a lot of
It's gross
times.
how much access we have here
Yeah.
because there's so much like in the United States, there's certain chemicals and ingredients and things that we can consume as food that is illegal and banned in every other country.
True.
So here in the United States, we are basically being poisoned through food. and all the spraying and all the chemicals, but we're being poisoned through our food. So, that's that population control. So for me,
That's
getting my
terrible. Sounds very terrible. It sounds
well,
terrible.
it's like pharmaceutical drugs, all the chemicals that are in the water, food resources, the spraying of the wheat and all the things, the folic acid spraying all of our food. None of it, no wonder we have cancer and dementia and Alzheimer's and all the things we have going on. So the best I can do is, I'm not obsessed where I'm like nuts about it. I eat what's provided, but I just do the best that I can when I go to source something, to get something that's as clean as possible at the price I can afford. And if I can't afford it, then I get what I can. And if not, I'll just won't take that item. It's like I try not to get too overwhelmed by it, or overhyped by it. I just do the best I can each day to eat something that has a seed in it, and if I do get a seed, then I'll save the seed and I'll dry the seed out and I'll plant that seed and grow that seed next year, like I did with my pumpkins. I had a couple pumpkin seeds, and now I'm taking seeds from that pumpkin seed that came from that seed, and it's just like it perpetuates a cycle.
Yeah.
um and
I think
and the
there's
same thing with cannabis. Like with cannabis, sometimes people give me seeds, sometimes people give me clones. Autoflowers, somebody gave me autoflowers, but you can't clone autoflowers, so it's kind of a one-time deal. And so I just take what's provided, and if I'm going to go purchase something, I'll be mindful of its source and how much money I'm spending on it, and seeing if it fits in my budget. But I usually just take what's given to me and put it in the ground and grow it.
yeah,
I mean, I can get all hyped up about where it comes from and who I get it from and what the price is. But then at the end of the day, if something's given to me, I will grow it, or I'll put it in the ground, or I'll work with it. Because I'm not so pretentious that I will say, no to some things. Some things I will say absolutely no, it's a toxic poison. But if somebody's giving me something like, some food or certain kinds of seeds, I'll take that, because I don't know when that's going to be a scarcity.
true.
I don't think in scarcity mindset, but I also don't always just say no thank you to everything because it doesn't hit my highest level of standard of of organic, of all of that. It's like at some point you just have to meet reality where it's at and accept what's provided. And so I always kind of divert to that. I can say no thank you to certain things, but then at the end of the day, we don't know when we're going to have access to certain things and when we're not. So
Right.
I try not to be so picky um, that I lose track of, the time that my grandma survived getting through the Great Depression, the time that my grandfather survived the hunger genocide in Ireland. That's always looming in the back of my head, that could occur. That could occur to me in my lifetime, and that could occur to my children. So I don't want to create such a Pollyanna mindset around seeds and local and sourcing things, to where I don't realize that, I also am humble enough and I'm grateful enough to take what's provided.
Yeah. A lot of us really get hyped about it and get into
Mhm.
the overthinking or deep thinking. But I think
Right,
there's also a
right.
lot of times, I mean, a lot of things I'm reading and also seeing as an example, like kids are also getting, are made familiar with eating worms.
Mhm.
I was hearing that in the news and from some of my friends. It to be happening in the Western Europe in certain places. So it's just, yeah, we don't know what really is in the future, but yeah, whatever you mentioned, like it's everything makes so much sense actually.
Well, I mean, they're gonna try things out. Like there's always marketing and advertising and capitalism when it comes to food. So a lot of things that are commonplace in some cultures, like eating bugs or eating certain animal body parts, or just eating certain things may be commonplace in one area, and then they try to bridge it over to, you know, a culture like ours, and it may or may not work. And so then there's this sort of this conspiracy group of people that think, oh well, they're going to make us start eating worms and bugs because they're trying to take away beef because of climate change, and then all the cow farts and all the carbon emissions, and then then you've got Bill Gates, who has this sort of weird thing around coating all the fruits and with this chemical to keep bugs away or something. But then now we have impossible meat, which was pushed for a while, but now there's some questionable things going on with the impossible meat, and now it's worms, and then it's caterpillars, or it's like
Hmm.
there's always something going through the food chain in the media that is, I think, testing out to see what the reaction is of people, because then
Hmm.
people are going to like freak out on social media and have all these things and write all these comments. So I think partly things are put out there that people are doing this to see how people will react to it, but then
Yeah.
also, how much of a control can we have on people's food choices if food is scarce? So there was this whole thing, in Portland when COVID first hit, and you couldn't get paper towels and toilet paper and like certain things, because it was put out over the media that this was occurring and this was occurring. So then people had this reaction. And so I think when I hear about things with food and it's out in the media, I just shut it off. It's like I just have to go, okay, what is in my local environment? What makes sense? What's affordable? And what do I have access today? I
Hmm.
ultimately have to shut off all things media and look in my immediate environment for how do I get my resources and my needs met. That's how I survive all of it. Is
Yeah.
I push off.
Makes so much sense. Yeah.
And I just eat what I can in my immediate environment. I mean, I'm sure, with everything going on around the world, and the lack of food resources that people have, I don't think they're having conversations like this. It's like
Right.
they're lucky to just have access to wheat to make some kind of bread item to eat. I mean, that's all some people have access to, is just one ingredient, and how to sustain themselves off of that one ingredient.
No.
I mean, it makes it almost ridiculous for me to even think about all the ways that I make choices about all the foods I have access to, when somebody only has access to one ingredient on, in this part of the world. What can I do about it? I don't know. I don't know. So what I do about it, because I don't know how to fix it, is I just do my best to take care of myself and my body with the least amount of ingredients possible. So I go to Whole Foods. I can have a lot of variety of Whole Foods, but I'm not using a lot of ingredients to process and make and put that whole food into my body. So it's a little bit easier for me to digest. I mean, that's the best that I can do,
Yeah.
because it gets overwhelming to think about the bigger picture of the world. So I just think about
No.
locally, what can I do to keep myself healthy as possible, so I can take care of my kids, so I can, pay it forward to the people in my community. I mean, that's really where I have to focus my attention.
Yeah.
And I pray for people, and I think about people that have less and scarcity, and are starving, and food genocide goes on all around the planet. So I do what I can to speak up for, food equity. I think food equity is the most important kind of equity. I mean, not skin color equity and disability equity. It's like that's important. But my gosh, food and water for all, to me, is like, you know, if I was to jump on any mission, it would be that. So I just provide that mindset locally. How can I get fresh water for me and my family, and how can I get clean whole food ingredients, to feed the people I care about? And that's what I can do about the world.
Yeah. Makes so much sense. Like these. our conversation actually, like with the things that you are doing, and also we are discussing about. So it's just like
Hmm.
contemplating on the whole knowledge we have access to in general.
Hmm.
We see the media, we read about it. So I think we shouldn't forget it. I think that's something. But yeah, I think this almost brings us to the end of our conversation. Uh, it was lovely speaking with you, Dr. Paula, again.
Oh, thank you for being a gracious host and listener. And you really put out thought-provoking questions. And I think that's what gets me excited about coming back and speaking with you is the things that you think about and the things that you put out toward me. It's like it gets me thinking about things and my place in things and what I can do to help those who suffer. So I appreciate your listening and I appreciate your questioning.
Thanks for your time, Dr. Paula, again.
All
Uh,
right.
See you next time. Thank you. Bye bye.
All right. Thank you.